What First Daughter Go Through Part 2. But life wasn't always as idyllic as it seemed. The press, ever hungry for a story, began to track her every move. They would show up at her school, snap photos when she went out with friends, and hound her whenever she attended a public event. Claire had learned to deal with the attention, but it wasn't easy. She would often retreat to the quiet corners of her school's campus, trying to find moments of peace in a world that never stopped moving. Still, there was a part of her that felt torn. She loved her mother, and she was proud of what she had accomplished, but the weight of being the first daughter never truly left her. It followed her wherever she went, no matter how far she tried to escape it. As the years went by, Claire continued to struggle with the conflicting emotions that came with being in the public eye. She had her moments of doubt, her moments of anger, but she also had her moments of pride. She had witnessed firsthand the incredible journey her mother had taken, and she couldn't deny the impact Eleanor had made on the world. When Claire turned 20, her mother was re-elected for a second term. It was a historic moment, not just because Eleanor was the first woman to hold the office, but because she had proven that she could govern with strength and grace. The country had embraced her, and Claire couldn't have been prouder. But that didn't mean it was easy. Claire had always felt like she was in her mother's shadow, and now that shadow loomed larger than ever. It wasn't just the media attention, it was the pressure to live up to the legacy of a woman who had shattered so many barriers. Claire had her own ambitions, her own dreams, but how could she ever measure up to someone like her mother? It wasn't until she found herself sitting alone in a quiet corner of the White House, a cup of coffee in hand, that Claire had an epiphany. She didn't need to live up to anyone's expectations but her own. She didn't need to follow in her mother's footsteps. She just needed to follow her heart. That night, Claire called her mother into her office. "Mom," Claire began, her voice steady but full of emotion. "I've been thinking a lot lately. I've spent so much of my life trying to be perfect, trying to fit into this mold of what the world expects a first daughter to be. But I realize now that I can't do that anymore. I have to find my own path." Eleanor listened intently, her expression softening as she looked at her daughter. "You've always been your own person, Claire," Eleanor said, her voice filled with warmth. "I've always known that, and I'm proud of you for realizing that. You don't need to live up to my legacy. You need to build your own." It was then that Claire understood what her mother had been trying to teach her all along. The legacy wasn't about perfection or conformity. It was about finding your own voice, your own purpose, and Claire was ready to find hers. The next few years weren't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when Claire felt overwhelmed by the weight of her name. But slowly, she began to carve out a space for herself. She enrolled in college, studying environmental science, and became involved in several grassroots movements that focused on sustainability and climate change. It was a cause that had always been close to her heart, and now she was able to pursue it without the constant pressure of being the first daughter. She also began to speak publicly about her experiences, using her platform to advocate for mental health awareness and the importance of self-care. She was no longer the girl who had been lost in her mother's shadow. She was Claire Walker, an advocate, a student, and a woman finding her own way. And though the road was still challenging, Claire knew she wasn't walking it alone. She had her mother's support, and more importantly, she had learned to believe in herself. Being the first daughter had never been easy, but it had taught her the most valuable lesson of all, that it was okay to be herself, to embrace her own journey, and to forge her own path in the world. And that was something no one could ever take away from her.